Good afternoon, everyone. Well, we're back. Hope you had a nice lunch, but that you're still hungry for some low carbon knowledge, because that's what we're going to keep giving you. So, we're starting with the third impact session that's going to be about regional impacts. And we have three presenters. We're still missing one presenter, but hopefully he can join us. Otherwise, we'll just play his pre-recorded presentation. As I said, this session is going to be about regional impact. So if some of you might recall, the yesterday's session were more about the global perspective and integrated modeling approaches to low carbon lifestyles. And I think that in this session, we're actually going to open up this like global generalized box of integrated assessment models and scenarios and look at the specific approaches, how we might reduce the environmental impacts through lifestyle analysis. And then maybe even more importantly, two of the presentations are going to deal between this connection between the final user, the consumer, in many of the models and the production side, because most of the models and these global approaches assume there's a direct link, direct response between the consumer and the production side, so that you see like immediate changes. But as two of our presenters are going to show us, there are like quite some impediments that make it that even when you have lifestyle changes happening at the consumer end, this might not actually lead to a systemic change that we would require if we wanted to pursue those sustainable pathways. So we have three presenters, very exciting with us, who are Caroline Vafos, Gibran Witan, and Raul. And before I pass the mic on to them, I'll just like to point out that we also have two very exciting poster sessions ready for you on the same topic, so impacts on the regional level. And these are the poster session number 13 from Madalena Ripa, which is titled Closer Look at How EU Countries Outsource Their Energy Uses, and number 15 by Laura Perez Sanchez, Effects on the International Division of Labor on Lifestyle. I would really welcome you to take a look at those poster sessions in the Discord forum as well. And that's it. So now I'm going to pass the word to Caroline. We're going to listen to her pre-recorded presentation, after which is going to be also available for some questions and answers. Okay, here we go, Caroline.
Hello, this is Caroline, and I'm presenting to you our work where we're kind of investigating the question, what could low-carbon transformed lifestyles look like? This is work in progress, and so I'd be happy to discuss any ideas with you later on. This is co-authored by my colleagues Christina Dembski and Catherine Sherry, and we're all based at Cardiff University and within the Centre of for Climate Change and Social Transformations, short CAST. So just to give you a brief overview where we're coming from. So at the centre, we're focusing on people as agents of change. And this is based on the previous work from the IPCC and other reports where limiting to 1.5 degrees is suggested to necessitate rapid, far-reaching and unprecedented social changes. And social science has been given a very prominent role in these reports. So we are really focusing on how can we as a society live differently and better to achieve systematic, deep and rapid emission reductions. Furthermore, we're sort of looking at 4 areas. So we think that transformations to low carbon lifestyles play a key role in limiting climate change, and these 4 areas or patterns of lifestyle choices have been proven to be particularly difficult to change. So the areas are diet, material consumption, heating and cooling the homes, and mobility. And I would also like to highlight Lorraine Whitmarsh's keynote, which is scheduled for Friday, 9 a.m. She's the director of our centre, and we'll talk a little bit more about it in general. So increasingly, research and policy recommendations have been done in developing pathways to low carbon futures, again highlighting here the IPCC report, but also other reports. And however, little research has been done in how the global and abstract scenarios translate into low carbon lifestyles. So my colleagues Claire Hanmer and Charlie Wilson have already talked about it yesterday, where they presented their modelling approach to translating the 1.5 scenarios into low carbon lifestyle pathways. And we're working with them together to sort of look into future visions of what low carbon lifestyles could look like. And then B, and this is more our focus, and what I'm presenting today is the public perceptions of pathways to transformations. And particularly, we're interested in public engagement for desirable and feasible visions of change. The previous work has already looked into public views on low carbon lifestyles and found that public views can particularly help to bring out what is socially acceptable for very complex changes, things that modelling can't really anticipate, such as like trust, responsibility, fairness, affordability, and therefore we believe that public views are really important to consider, which is highlighted by work that my colleagues Christina Dembski and Catherine Cherry have done in different projects, one focusing on energy futures and one focusing on resource efficiency strategies similar to material consumption. So where we are taking our work is to use a more holistic approach to lifestyle changes. Therefore, we're focusing across 4 different areas, and we are trying to focus on how low carbon futures must address core principles and values such as fairness and trust, etc. We're also really focusing on co-benefits that can possibly mobilize people and policy, and also explore potential differences between 4 countries. And here we picked Brazil, China, the UK and Sweden to do this research in. So the question really is, what could low carbon transformed lifestyles look like? We're going to do deliberative workshops, and as I said, this is work in progress. We're still working out the details of our fieldwork, and I'm here presenting some of our core ideas that sort of feeding into the development of our fieldwork. So our core questions for our fieldwork at the moment are what are feasible and desirable pathways for achieving climate change targets and other sustainability goals, and how do these vary within the UK and across other countries? And also, what are the societal values and potential trade-offs associated with low carbon sustainable transformations? I will talk a little bit more about the deliberative workshops towards the end of my presentation, but here are now I will just present a few of the ideas that are feeding into the development of these workshops, which is mostly so far based on desk research. So we are using the Avoid, Shift and Improve framework, which has previously been used in the area of mobility mostly, and we're trying to use this to sort of describe pathways of low carbon lifestyles that aim to achieve a decarbonisation of the 4 areas we're interested in. And so, for example, the Avoid strategy, just generally a description of it is that the aim is to reduce the amount of a service. So And just to give you some examples, and this is not extensive, this is just to illustrate it a little bit. So, for example, in the area of diet, this could generally mean eating less food, or particularly meat as a high carbon intensive food group. In the area of mobility, this could mean just traveling less generally. So this could include working from home, which we're all currently becoming familiar with. Or, for example, in the area of cooling and heating, this could include reducing the thermostat. So actually being in colder rooms, or in hotter countries, this could mean that the air condition isn't used to cool down the room to very cold temperatures. The shift strategy is mostly really about shifting to a low carbon type of service. So, for example, in the area of diet, and this might overlap a little bit with the avoid strategy, but it's, for example, to shift to more plant-based diets. This would include, for example, replacing high carbon intensive meats such as beef with low carbon intensive alternatives such as plant-based diets. Or in the area of mobility, this could include shifting from car use to public or active transport. And then lastly, in the area of improve, this strategy is really mostly about improving the carbon intensity of a service. And while the avoid and shift strategy are really much more about changing how we use a service, the improve strategy is more about making it more efficient, but this still needs people to adopt a different type of service. And so, for example, in the area of diet, this could include lab-grown meat, which still needs to be accepted from people. And in the area of mobility, for example, this could include electric cars, which still need to be bought by people. So, as I already said, we are also really interested in potential co-benefits and the public perception around these areas. And we've done some desk research to better understand this a little bit, and we're hoping to find out more about it in our workshops as well. So I brought along 2 examples. For example, in the area of meat reduction, a co-benefit could be really around health. There's been a lot of research around reducing meat consumption and how it's related to global reduction of type 2 diabetes, obesity, various cancers, cardiovascular diseases, etc. In the area of public perception, this is particularly interesting for our research across countries. So I guess a lot of people are quite aware of this, but meat is quite an integral part of cultural traditions. And I picked out 2 examples I found particularly interesting. So in Brazil, for example, the Sunday barbecue, they are just very important part of a social life with a cultural meaning attached to it. And rejecting meat could then be understood as rejecting the community, for example. This is what some research found. And in China, for example, in Chinese traditional medicine, beef and sheep are considered as sort of hot foods, which are supposed to be healthy to consume in winter. So this is very interesting if you want to talk about reducing it. Like for example, beef consumption, these could be hurdles in specifically in Brazil and China, and they vary across different cultures and countries. So another example is in mode shifting around transport. So benefits are, again, health benefits. So an improved air quality could be a co-benefit, which we're already experiencing at the moment, and mental and physical health through active transport in particular. And in terms of public perception, there are some good examples out there, some positive ones, where shifting to low carbon transport is already a social norm. So, for example, in China, bike sharing and electric bikes are widely used in Beijing. And in Sweden, for example, there has been quite recently the movement around flight shaming, and that has been associated with actually a decline in air travel. So coming back to our workshops, so really in our deliberative workshops, we're hoping to use public engagement methods to explore desirable and feasible visions of change. And for this, we're currently designing one-day workshops modeled around 3 parts. So first, we're hoping to introduce low carbon lifestyles generally and do things such as a carbon footprinting exercise where people can explore their own carbon emissions through their lifestyles. Then in the second part, we are really focusing on the acceptability and feasibility of low carbon lifestyle strategies. So here we would discuss what I introduced earlier, the avoid, shift and improve strategies, the different pathways and options we identified in our desk research, and also in collaboration with Claire Hammer and Charlie Wilson, who presented yesterday. So the modelling work will underpin this. And we would discuss the different pathways and then also the holistic changes that this requires for people's lifestyles, and also some co-benefits and trade-offs that are associated with it. And then in the third part, we really want to do some more visioning stuff. So we want to create future visioning profiles with people. So we are thinking about using methods such as a day in your life exercise, so where people envisage and are very descriptive about a future in 2050, for example, or 2030, or whenever we choose to transfer them to, where people envisage what the life would be like. So as I already said, we're planning to do this in the UK, but also in different countries, and we're aiming to compare the visions of change across countries, because the blanket approach is not culturally sensitive. So we're hoping to sort of explore the different visions in different countries and what people think would work for them. So therefore we're planning to do these workshops in Sweden, the UK, Brazil and China. Yeah, so lastly, a bit of an outlook. So we hope that our findings will illustrate key elements for visions of change across 4 difficult areas. The area of mobility, diet, material consumption and how we heat and cool our homes, and across the 4 different countries as well. In the next step, we're currently planning to conduct our fieldwork. It was originally planned to be done in autumn this year. With the coronavirus outbreak, we are not entirely sure what will happen. So that's a bit on hold and we're exploring alternatives. So one option could be to do the workshops online. So if anyone has any experience, we're really keen to discuss this. Yeah. So, and then a bit more of an outlook, what we hope to achieve with this work is to develop low carbon lifestyle profiles or lifestyle transformations that are underpinned by public values and preferences, that sort of highlight and also acknowledge and account for cross-cultural differences, and that are also underpinned by translations of the 1.5 degree scenarios into low carbon lifestyles, as we're working very closely with Claire Hammer and Charlie Wilson on this. And then I didn't mention this yet, but part of this work package or this project is to also do a longitudinal study, so a longitudinal survey in the different countries. So we're hoping to also test some of these profiles to see how many people prefer which sort of profile approach to transforming low carbon lifestyles. Yeah, that's it from me. If you have any questions, any ideas, any comments, that would be really amazing. And you can email me, or obviously now there's some time to talk as well.
Hello.
Wow, yeah, that was really, really good. I mean, I must first of all commend you that moving from the scenario global perspectives, very quantitative. I think it's super important that we actually try to visualize what kind of lifestyles we could and would have lived if we actually wanted to stay within a carbon budget limit, let's say, right? Because many times I think when we look at those pathways that show really rapid reduction in emissions, we think like, oh my God, we cannot do it. Like, this is impossible. We cannot reduce emissions by 90% in 40 years. But then through visualizing how our life would look like, actually, if we do go down that pathway, it could become a bit easier. Like I personally always think about how it was 20 years ago when, for example, fun fact, we used about 30% less energy. So there was a 30% less energy demand. And I don't think life was that bad, especially if we account into the technological improvements, energy efficiency improvements in the recent 20 years, we could, for example, probably live quite well with 30% less energy. So yeah, really thank you so much for giving us this different perspective and this push that we actually have to visualize our futures and not just look at these number grinding scenarios.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I should say that I'm actually an environmental psychologist by training. So this is sort of more what I normally do, and the numbers are sort of the context of what I do. So yeah, thank you. I already see lots of questions. Should I go through them, or are you as a moderator going through them?
You can pick your own questions if that's fine with you. If you have something specific.
Yeah, let me see. They basically came in towards the end of the talk. So I think the first one, maybe I start with the very first one. So the question is whether I imagine scaling up for the findings post-workshop and identify lifestyle groups. So yes, I think it would be really great if we could do that. And I mean, again, this is work in progress. So these are just ideas floating around at the moment. But we're hoping to bring the archetype approach that Claire's presented yesterday together with the visioning that we are going to do. And then also we're going to do a survey that I briefly mentioned in my presentation. That's another colleague who's doing this. And hopefully through that, we can sort of create profiles or pathway profiles, I guess, and then see what the prevalence is in the different countries in the large survey. So we know the quantity, like how many people support a certain approach. So that's the idea, really. I hope I answered that question. But happy to chat in the forum later as well. So have we compared lab-grown meat impact and energy requirements with ecological, local, familiar farms producing meat? Lab meat is really more sustainable? Is that the question? I looked into that a little bit. So I've done a lot of reviewing literature in preparation for preparing our workshops and everything. And I think so it looks like it can be more sustainable if we use renewable energy to grow our meat. That's how I understand it. I hope this answers your question. But there might be other experts out there who can tell me more about it. So Jackie Chris is asking, interesting presentation, but in what way do you address implementation and pathways? That is the more difficult part, how to make an impact. I'm not entirely sure if I understand the question fully. Maybe you can rephrase it in the forum, or we have a chat about it. I'm sorry, I'm blanking here. I really don't understand exactly what you mean. So I'm going to the next one. With regards to term flight shaming movement, recommend to look at replies by Sarah, the staying on the ground movement and what international media often refer to as flight shaming movement is the same. The thing is that the media had misinterpreted the movement and wrongly referred to it as flight shaming movement, but flight shaming is not really strategy. Yeah, I absolutely agree, actually. I think I just picked up those words. Personally, I prefer a positive phrasing of things, and I saw Sarah's presentation earlier and I really, really liked it. So I'm going to pick up on that. So it's a question from Charlie related to Jacko's question. So I know you haven't done the workshops yet, but from your literature review to date, what's your sense of the relative desirability and feasibility of the three types of strategy: avoid, shift, and improve? For example, might avoid strategies be seen as the least desirable but the most feasible? And conversely, might shift strategies be the least feasible but the least desirable but the most feasible? Yeah, okay, I think I get the question now. So, I mean, there is just not very much research around avoid strategies specifically in the area of meat consumption. There seems to be quite a resistance around reducing meat, and that's for various reasons, and that's across different countries, for example. And I think shifting to avoiding or reducing meat consumption is just not very popular, and it's maybe a bit more complex on how that could change. In other areas, such as flying, for example, again, the avoid strategy, there is just not very much literature. These strategies have really not been used very much in the social science literature, to my understanding so far. There's much more literature around improving, so the improvement of, let's say, we're using electric cars because that's the improved way of using individual transport, and there's a lot of literature around how we deal with that and how people accept it, and what sort of are the barriers to buying electric cars. But I'd be happy to take that discussion
Caroline,
yeah.
I think we have 2 more minutes left, and
Okay.
I think an interesting question comes from Stefan, who asks, if you include policymakers in your deliberative workshops as well, how do they assess the feasibility of the shift, avoid, and improve?
Yes. So originally we wanted to do stakeholder workshops, but we're not going to do them anymore, partially due to time issues. And but also because our project very much focuses, at least in our specific sort of part of the project, we're really interested in what the public thinks. I think there has been a lot of visioning work around what stakeholders and policymakers think about how we can get somewhere or what the future might look like. But we come from the public perception and public engagement perspective, and we think it's really important in order to do this, to look at how people actually think we can do this. And it would be great if we could include policymakers more in this, and maybe in a follow-up project that would be really interesting. Maybe we could show preferences of what the public thinks. But at this stage, unfortunately, we can't really include policymakers too much in this specific project.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Caroline. I do invite all of you guys who are listening to join Caroline after this session, also in the Discord forum, where she'll be happy to answer the remainder of the questions. Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you.
And now I would pass the mic to Gibran Vita, who is a PhD from Open University of Netherlands, and is going to be talking about the measuring the environmental impact of green consumption and sufficiency. And we're going to play the video from Gibran, and he's also going to be available to answer your questions afterwards. So here we go.
Hello everyone, my name is Gibran Vita. I'm going to be talking about the environmental impact of human needs and need satisfaction, and also about the impact of lifestyle changes featuring green consumption and sufficiency lifestyles, and all of this within the framework of clarifying some opportunities towards sustainable well-being. So I'm gonna do this by showcasing 3 cases of recent research. The first one is about the carbon emission of human needs and their satisfaction. The case 2 is about modeling scenarios of green consumption and sufficiency lifestyles. And the number 3 is measuring the impact and the well-being of sustainability activists. So to make a case, can lifestyles influence impact and well-being? Well, that's what we will find out today. And the three papers have a particularly relevance at different leverage points when it comes to opportunities to encourage lifestyle changes. So the first one is here more speaking to the needs and wants on the individual level. Second one more about critical mass and the changes in ownership and consumption. And the third one is focusing on the potential of grassroots initiatives to break up or enhance some of the personal context variables that normally influence consumption and impact. The research uses a mixture of methods, but one of the overarching methods is multi-regional input-output models. This one enables us to calculate consumption-based footprints. In this case, we use ICTA-UAB. So for those of you who are not familiar, the reason why we like to use this is because we can calculate life cycle upstream emissions, energy, and resources of consumption products. So for example, you think about your phone, maybe some metals were extracted in South America and Central Africa. They were sent to China to be put into a phone. Then India maybe sent some software, some packaging, before it got sent to the USA, where it was consumed. So in these methods, we are able to estimate all the upstream water, land, energy emissions or toxic emissions that occurred in the story of producing that phone. So in paper number 1, we make an effort to provide a framework to connect the economy, resources, and human well-being. The assumption is that we have underlying capitals in our society, cultural, natural, and social. And then we draw from those capitals through strategies, can be the political system, energy system, and so on, in order to create different satisfiers that will eventually satisfy individual human needs, which make up well-being. This is based on the taxonomy by Max Neef, Human Scale Sustainable Development. And the key message here is that the needs are fixed and universal, and they are non-negotiable. So we cannot really change those, but we can really choose the satisfiers, the strategies, and how much capital they rely on, or which kind of capital. It can be more material or less material, market or non-market, and so on. So for Max Neef, the needs are fixed and they can occur in different dimensions of existence. This in the middle are the satisfiers that occur at different dimensions of existence. So in this research, because we focus on consumption and on the market consumption, we are limited to explore satisfiers within having and interacting, so built environment and so on. So what we try to do is relate the consumption products to the needs they might relate to, and then transform that into a matrix and prepare it for input-output calculations. More information in the paper. The main results show the global carbon footprint, and in different classifications. To the left is like the basic economic classification, consumables, durables, and services. Then here in the middle, more consumption-oriented classification, housing, transport, and so on. And then here to the right is how they look in terms of fundamental human needs. So we find that about half of the emissions are associated to subsistence and protection, and then an equal portion divided between identity, creation, freedom, and leisure, and just a very marginal amount to understanding and participation. So this is the global picture, and we calculated for every country as well. So the next step is to assess how satisfied those needs are across nations, and whether there is a relationship with the footprint invested in those needs. So we have satisfaction here on the y-axis and footprint on the x-axis, and we test different curve fits. We try to use the 3 different type of indicators. One is subjective satisfaction, like freedom to choose, when people respond subjectively. The other one is importance or values, how valuable is that type of need in a given society. And then the third one is more objective, normally conducted by a third party, like in this case institutional freedom. So we test several curve fits and then see which one fits better, or whether there's no relationship at all. And we ended up using 35 indicators from 12 different databases. So these are the hypotheses that we tested to see whether consumption relates to footprint and well-being, if there's any correlation, and if there is, what is the shape, if it's a linear, if it's a threshold, if it's a Kuznets curve or a diminishing return, perhaps a constant, or no relationship at all, because need satisfaction depends on completely different things rather than consumption or footprint. From the 35 indicators that we evaluated, we only found 15 to have a statistical relationship with the footprint of the need, out of which 11 were objective indicators, such as inverse fertility rate or child survival rate, access to sanitation, and so on. 2 of them were values, and 2 of them were subjective. That was the case for freedom to choose and satisfaction with creativity. The rest of the indicators did not show any significant relationship. 20 of them did not show any relationship at all. For example, the case of protection, which was tested with more than 3 indicators because it's very multidimensional. We see that most of protection indicators remain unsatisfied despite of protection taking a very big share of the footprint, meaning that trying to satisfy protection through market consumption is far from a guarantee or is not really associated with the satisfaction. In the second paper, we started by going around Europe gathering visions for the future from different countries and different type of stakeholders. Then from those visions, we built scenarios of green consumption and sufficiency, adjust parameters in the multi-regional input-output model, and then evaluate the outcome of that hypothetical scenario and complement a little bit about quality of life implications through literature review. We ended up with 36 different scenarios for which we tested the outcomes of carbon, toxicity, land, and water across different consumption domains. The percentage here indicates the mitigation potential with respect to current European consumption. The numbers here in yellow mark when the change is not big enough to be very conclusive, and certainly the implementation would matter. I find that choosing, for example, natural fibers doesn't make a very big difference, but choosing durable fashion, as in second-hand clothing and more durable clothing, makes a difference. You can read in the paper all the details about what is behind each scenario, the description, and the parameters that are implied in modeling this scenario. The numbers in red indicate a potential risk of backfire. For example, a policy of intensive repairing and renovation for seeking energy efficiency might reduce carbon, but might also increase toxicity or need more land. When it comes to diet, naturally, the more you move out of animal-based food, the higher the mitigation potential. Still, this kind of modeling signals potential risk. For example, in supplying a healthy vegan diet might lead to some increases in land. That's why in reality it matters to choose the products and the substitutes very wisely. The food and the energy scenarios that have an asterisk were modeled through physical layers of kilocalories or kilowatt hours to overcome the limitation of input-output modeling, which is in monetary units very often. When it comes to sufficiency of food, the food sufficiency, which means eating just the necessary calories, supplying just the necessary calories, has the most potential, even more than minimizing waste. And important that many of these scenarios can be combined to yield even larger potential. In manufactured products, sharing and repairing has the most potential, but also reducing the household chemicals and plastic has some potential, and being a offline minimalist or having more durable appliances, which means just minimizing gadgets at the end or having more durable gadgets, have some interesting potentials. When it comes to transport, of course, only biking and walking only has the most gains. But this is an input-output model, so it doesn't really replace the bottom-up transport models. However, it allows us to test many scenarios in a consistent framework to provide an indication of what can be interesting or what can be a potential risk, or where can we look further. Same with services. Here we evaluated the community services scenario, implies that we reduce leisure, entertainment, and other type of services, and reshift towards more cultural and membership and other type of services. And non-market services assumes that we supply a lot of the services ourselves outside of the market. In the housing scenarios, passive housing more or less correlates with other literature in terms of mitigation potential. But because the participants were also involved in eco-villages, we tested the kind of a pre-industrial eco-village and also a more high-tech eco-village and what could be the potential implications. Of course, renewable electricity for housing or for transport here have a backfire of they can reduce carbon, but they might increase land and water. So this is the kind of warnings that we would like to communicate of. Another advantage of input-output is that we are able to see the changes in the global south or in the producing countries. So transport, housing, and services, changes in these domains have more benefits inside Europe, but changes in food, clothing, manufactured products have actually spare more resources in the producing countries, which is often developing countries or the global south. In the last paper, we focus on the potential of grassroots initiatives to reduce impact and promote well-being. So we rolled out an extensive survey asking for consumption and lifestyle type of questions to normal control citizens, control groups, but also to members of a very wide range of initiatives with the common ground that all of them are involved in sustainability. So we found a difference. We found immediately that initiative members have a little bit less footprint, mostly in food and clothing, not very clear in housing and transport. This is just descriptive statistics. The next step to really isolate the effect of belonging to an initiative and also control for all those socio-demographic factors that influence consumption was to set up a regression model where we tested the effect of joining an initiative. Here, the numbers that cross this line means that there's no statistical significance. So yes, we confirmed that the joining an initiative or people who are in an initiative have 15% less carbon footprint, 43% less carbon footprint of food, 86% less carbon footprint of clothing, but surprisingly the housing and the transport are not statistically significant. This really indicates about the infrastructure lock-ins that even people with certain values or certain attitudes might be able to have certain agency over food and clothing and so on, but housing and transport are very hard to overcome. Despite the fact that initiative members actually behave differently, using less electricity, less cars, traveling less in general, and walking more, the efforts were not enough to actually yield significant results in reduction in these domains of transport and housing. But interestingly, the initiative members seem to break the higher income, higher footprint relationship. This is a very common relationship that we find in literature, and we confirmed here with a 27% proportionality between increases in income and increases in footprint. But this was not found for initiative members, meaning that they can earn more, but it doesn't necessarily translate to consumption or footprint. We were also interested in knowing if this lower consumption had any impact on the well-being, but quite the contrary. We found grassroots initiative members to be 11 to 13% more happy in general using the life satisfaction scale. there's many mechanisms and many levels at which the grassroots initiatives enable a more broader sustainability transition. One main mechanism is social learning, where people install new norms and share new skills and create basically a new reality. And it works at a personal context, when individuals feel more motivated, more empowered, and so on. At a social context, people create networks, people create other kind of discourses, and also a technical context where people, members of initiatives, create new technologies or resist planned obsolescence or simply innovate and become prosumers. These are the links to the papers where they are openly available as a preprint. Otherwise, you can look for them in the journal if you have access, or you can email me if you're interested in them. We can conclude that lifestyles can indeed influence impact and well-being, whether it is by creating eco-efficient satisfiers of needs, upscaling different lifestyle changes to mitigate environmental impact and climate change, or by creating new opportunities for people to reduce impact and enhance their well-being through grassroots initiatives or different kind of organizations. Thank you so much for your attention.
Hi, Gibran. Yeah, thanks so much for this talk. Can you hear me? Do we still have Gibran?
I can hear you. Yeah, I can hear you. You cannot hear me?
Yes. Loud and clear.
Okay,
well,
great.
Really brilliant work. Yes, seems like you've done really a lot of work there. You already published 3 papers and all, and definitely something that comes from a conceptual base to input-output modeling on a quite a sophisticated micro level that aggregates together, as we see in the sensitivity analysis, quite major potential impacts on the carbon footprint, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So maybe I saw that you already answered some of the questions whilst you were playing the presentation. Sure. Let's see what we got. So Joel, for example, asks whether you can elaborate why supplying services outside the market has such a strong mitigation potential.
Yeah. So in the paper, you can read exactly what does it assume and what does it imply. But of course, this scenario assumes a very large peer-to-peer economy, where we supply a lot of the services. We still not all of them, but a lot of the services just peer-to-peer. And of course, it's very hard to know how much resources will we need if we do that, as compared to companies supplying it for us. So that particular scenario might be an overestimation, but actually I don't know, because it's a futuristic thing. So maybe we managed to make it very low impact, like with this sharing economy. Just actually, I'm reading Joel's paper on the sharing economy right now, precisely because I'm interested on knowing more about how to refine this scenario and what does this really implies in materially and energy wise. But the reason why it looks like that is because it assumes a very low inputs to supply peer-to-peer services, in contrast with supplying them by the market and through supply chains and all this. That's why.
Right. Maybe some kind of a related question, but from Maria Jose, who asks if this idea of low carbon lifestyles could be also passed on to the people from less developed countries, because if I understand, this is like the fully marketized Western society base that you do the model. So what do you think? How would this analysis transfer to developing countries?
Yeah, actually, I comment a little bit about that. Well, first of all, it's very important to know that changes in Europe and in rich countries actually liberate a lot of resources, labor and natural resources in the global south, let's say. And when it comes to changes in the global south, yeah, I think it's very worthwhile to do it now instead of going the whole way as Europe did through the very impactful lifestyles, and right now trying to turn it down. It proves very difficult, right? So because culture actually can change very fast. As we see right now, we're all socially isolating. And some months ago, maybe we would think that that was not possible at all. I think, like, I come from Mexico, for example, and I think it's more useful to have this low carbon mentality there right now, so we can basically skip that whole intensive development, as we call, like, leapfrogging towards high well-being and low impact. So most these scenarios, the food and the energy assume a physical constraint on what is the minimum energy or minimum food that you need, precisely to also make it relevant for people who don't like it. It's not the purpose to sacrifice people who are already unsatisfied in their needs. But still, dietary changes in consumption are worthwhile. The sooner the better. Yeah.
Right. I also find the question of Angela very interesting. She asks you about the rebound effect. So how do you account for the rebound effect in input-output analysis, knowing that when we live more sustainably, we can maybe save some money and then invest it in certain other activities that also involve some pollution?
Yeah. There is a lot of discussion about that, and as Angela says, so we model it through assuming that the money savings will be spent according to the current patterns equally, I think we try to do it according to elasticities. What it's supposed to, you're supposed to spend on services because food is stable. I don't remember exactly at the end what made it to the supplementary, but through doing this, I start to think about how the rebound effect is really also an economic assumption, that basically money is burning us, that we need to spend it at some point. But I also think that many people will die with money on their banks as well. I know, of course, companies are investing it in oil or whatever, but I mean, we need to draw a boundary. Where is your responsibility as a money holder? But it's hard to make assumptions of how are you going to spend the money on what in 30 years, if it's going to be donated, if it's going to be to buy land, to buy forest, I don't know, but when we test the effect of the rebound, income rebound, spending the money, of course, most of the benefit is gone, excepting green consumption, because there's less money left. Insufficiency, you're saving all the money. So if you spend it on something else, yeah, it eats most of the. But it matters on where the reduction is. Like, for example, services are less impactful per euro. So if you reduce mobility and spend on services, you have less of a rebound. But if you reduce services and you allocate that savings into mobility and other things, then it's a worse rebound. So it really matters from what to what do you shift.
I think you also answered the Filippo's question on the relationship between rebound and intrinsic motivation with this comment now. So that the default assumption that there's always going to be a rebound is also a bit shaky when you have these people who are driven by other things than just money. Yes. Yeah. And maybe, maybe we have time for just one very short question from Tadiq, who asks if the potential future transformation, considering the status quo, do you think that these kind of practices in the sustainable communities have any major potential to really impact the scenarios on a global level?
Yeah, I do. I see, for example, in the last paper, which is actually what Jeroen is asking, it was more about the grassroots members. When I study what has happened, I see really dramatic upscaling. For example, repair cafes, it was one in the Netherlands like 10 years ago, and now it's like thousands all over the world. Same with the eco village people, it was dozens, and now it's hundreds. Food cooperatives, so there's really a lot of upscaling going on, and I do see that they might influence the social norms and as Jeroen says, encourage also spillovers, because once you get drawn into eating better food, you meet people who are also doing other stuff and cycling, and kind of creates this positive virtuous cycle. But it really matters that it doesn't get absorbed by the capitalism, like it happened to to Uber or like Airbnb and all these things, right? How to make it that it stays like within the people and within the power of the people and so on, because then the investors are very always eager to see how can they free ride on something that is being created bottom up. So I think that's the main challenge. Yeah.
Thank you so much for all your answers and your presentation. I think we could continue this discussion for minutes, and I do strongly encourage all the participants to also continue it on the Discord channel that we're gonna publish after the final presentation. Thank you
so much, everyone, for the questions, and nice.
And now the final presentation of this session is going to be by Raul, a colleague from my institute, who's going to present the societal drivers of lifestyle through the museism framework. Raul, the mic is all yours.
Hi, one moment. I'm putting the PowerPoint there. Sorry. Okay, I have now to. Okay, I have to share my computer. Oops. This one. Okay, can you see the? Can you see the screen?
No, not yet.
Okay.
You should press. Yeah.
Now? Whoa. Okay. Now, I think. Oops, it's generating problem. Wait.
People might get a panic attack.
It's generating tunnel. Wait, sorry. It's the problem of using two screens that is making extra stuff. Sorry. Okay, let's. Now. Okay. Now it's okay, no?
Perfect. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you for the organizers to make all this possible. I think it's amazing the work that you made it. I will present a preliminary work. It is for some time that I am working on these ideas together with Laura and Mario. It starts, some of the stuff is starting from different conference, one in relation to social practice that it was really interesting to me, this new approach to handling with agency and the external context affecting our behaviors and actions and so on. And another coming from the European, the energy modeling platform for Europe, that realizing that the people running energy models, basically there are many engineers and economists, and when managing the scenarios and so on, basically they are including technological aspects and so on, but also basically when they put in agency inside, it is based in this agent-based models that reduce the agency of people just to consume or to invest. Then, well, let's start with this presentation. First of all, I will present a little bit this lifestyle and social practice issue, entering for what means this lifestyle. No, it's the idea is that we have different options. For example, for diet, no, we can be vegetarian, vegan, carnivorous. For mobility, for housing, no, or for work. That is the idea that we can choose. Then this is the criteria defining the different lifestyles. We have some kind of reflexivity that can make us choose in this kind of different options, and then we will have this different lifestyle. No? It will be the basic idea. But my question would be: this is different options that we can choose, or this is an option space? These are different life conditions, no? If you start to look into social practice, they are criticizing all of these choices, options, and so on. And from looking this discussion from metabolic patterns and from societal metabolism will bring us some maybe insights. This is what I will try to present today. No? For example, what determines this option space? What determines the available choices and motivation, attitudes, these behaviors? No. And also we can discuss also who decides the criteria. No? Okay. just fast from the people from social practice are framing and criticizing the idea of this this individualist approach, framing this like an ontological individualist. No, the social facts are just nothing that construction of individual people. No, this idea that societal phenomena are simple addition of individual decisions. No, based on attitudes, norms, and behavior. No, that they assume that basically that the individuals we behave consistently. No? And then we can see many policies that are based on this idea. No, it's like promoting that, for example, for biking, no, you can use the bike, share the road. No, bike is my choice. No, but basically the idea of choice for changing our pattern. No, this socialist ontologies. No, this is coming from more lifestyle or practice approach. They make different framing. No, these social facts are irreducible to individuals from more the father from sociology. No, one of the fathers is Durkheim, or this more in the Marxist literature. You will find that this abstract structure is what is this making concerning us or making our obsessed space. No, then you have to study the social, economic, political formations and the model of production. No, that is what make the people decide what is the option space of the people. Levi-Strauss, or in anthropology, we can find also literature in relation to myth, religion, languages, and so on. The proposal from people from social practice, this like kind of site ontology that really in a line would be that we have to take into account the context and to have into account that the people is carrier of practices. No, it's not only acting, but it's also people carrying practices inside. No, well, when looking into lifestyles and practice, basically they are extending the idea of the actions and choices to the extended, including this collecting aspect, no, of consumer practices. Lifestyle, we can say that well, Graham and Asena, she focused on the idea that the lifestyle is focusing too much in the social status of and distinction, no, the theory of taste, no, the distinction from Bourdieu. And well, basically, again, if we simplify with some, for example, ads, no, for example, Tesla, how he managed to sell and introduce the electric car was about how bringing no identity to the car. Or we can also do this. The people want to be like this reference, no, and then across the identity, you are attracting the consumption and the change, no. It have been criticized that this kind of framing of lifestyle approach is too much putting too much focus in the symbolical and communicative active aspects, and have received too much attention, no, and then lose attention of the part of the routines and the ordinary consumption that we have every day, no, the everyday life, that without reflexivity and like machines, no, then putting the focus on this part of the actions that we make, no, that they are not choices that are there, but we are not reflecting every day on them. This is what put the focus the practice, no. And one of the important points here that I wanted to remake is that as practices are sociotemporal entities, then it is important this aspect to connect with societal metabolism, as we will see later on. Well, then we can frame this first idea of the man with his different options. No, we can frame this like a social practice. Okay, understanding that we are shaping, we are moving to another theoretical framework. Understanding this, no. Okay, but again, no. If I will make a fast example to exemplify this idea. No, for example, this is the example of Elizabeth Shaw, that she used this meaning, material, and competence, for example, to change in the mobility. No, then the idea would be that if you use the materiality to change the patterns and so on, then, for example, you have to put the objects there that the people need. No, for example, the bikes, you have the parkings, the places to repair the bikes, the bike lanes, also to interlink with other modes of transport. And this we have to came together with the meaning issues, that it will be together with the relevance that it's having in the behavioral aspects. No, this why we are using the bag. No, for example, random fat and saves you money. On the cars, random money and make you fat. This kind of meaning idea. No. That also it takes into account the part of the shared meanings in society. It's not only you, that it have to be in the community, no? Otherwise, the people is not respecting this path. For example, these bike lines, not only the people, but also the police we can find. And also the part of the competence, which will be the third aspect, that is the knowledge and embodying the skills. You need also to provide the people the skills, the knowledge that they require to, for example, repair the bikes and run the bikes. No? Then if you have these three elements, then the practices can emerge and can be reproduced and there. Okay, but what happens then if I will enter now with the part of the societal metabolism? What happens with, for example, with the Jevons pattern, no? These rebound effects or this backfire. No, if you are optimizing some of your social practices, but there are other social practices that you start, for example, flying more and so on. But then how we take this into account? Well, from societal metabolism, from Museasm, this is what we are using in our group. What we need is to make it a closure. Okay, then I will make a quick example how you can do it. This. Then the idea is that for every person, for making their activities, you have 24 hours per day. Okay, then this gives us a closure, a quantitative closure of the amount of time that we have to provide to make activities, whatever we call it, social practice or whatever. Okay, then if we want to take into account this in society, what we have to take into account is all the human activities of all the people during all the time. Then we can add all these profiles of societal practice in a society, and then we will add it in what we call the societal functions. No, this will be all the time that you are requiring for example, the food, for mobility, for working, and so on. Okay, then if you add all these societal functions, you will have a number that will be all the population of the country, for example, multiply by all the time that you have in a year. That will be 800,000 hours, 760. Okay. Okay, let's move from this connection to what we have already developed in Museasm, no? Let's move like this. And for example, this will be the metabolism from Barcelona. Then we can represent Barcelona like a socio-ecological system, and we can represent the activities that happen outside the paywall, outside the market, and in the market. Then we have to combine different types of statistics, no? The statistics of pay work and the statistics of human time, and then we have to combine them. Of course, there are many practices, like, for example, the services that they are using different times at the same time. For example, in the mobility, we have the driver that is paid for driving the bus, and also the people that is using the bus. But this is important. Why? Because the energy that is used for the bus is consumed by both people. Otherwise, we don't have closure also with the energy and the time. And this is the connection that I need to go a step further in order that you can follow the explanation. Otherwise, it will be a mess. Then here is the representation of the human time. Okay, at different scales that will be from societal functions to the social practices. Okay, then we can allocate also the energy in the other part, and then we will have a ratio, that is how much energy you are using for per hour of time of human activity in this action, and then we will have this energy metabolic rates that is in relation to exosomatic devices. Okay, when we have this, we can make the what we call the end-use matrix that is representing these three elements, and then we will have all the human activity of the system. Here is the Barcelona, the energy metabolic rates, and the energy carriers that you are consuming. It could be electricity, heating fuels. We can do also this for example, the European level, for country level, and we will have the same. We will have the average society, all the society, and then we will have the different sectors, again, representing in human time, their functions at different levels, the metabolic rates, and the energy consumption. Okay, we can introduce here also the money, and then we will have also the economic productivity, and we can go lower in the analysis of the accounting. The important thing is that we have a closure. Okay, then this is just an example that you can add here more. That you can put the water, you can put CO2 emissions, you can put also the material products. They will be the nexus that we developed in the project. And then, but this is not only the part of the history that complicates the analysis of the context of social practices. No, we have to take into account also that this that has been already mentioned in the previous presentation, that we have also an open systems. No, we have the local production, that is, one part is going to us, another part is going to export, and of course our consumption is based also in a lot of imports. Then if we take this into account, this means that the social practice that we are performing in a local society have connections with a foreign society. These everyday life social practices are internationally connected. It means that, for example, trade agreements, historical issues like colonialism, environmental biodiversity, the different, if you have stocks of oil or not, or you have water to produce renewables or whatever, this will mean that this everyday life are affected for these elements. No? Okay, then we will have to take into account not only the openness of societies in relation to the human time, in the social practice, but also in relation to the connection to the environment. No? We are connecting our human activities with the environment, this environmental pressure, and also we have to connect not only in our local system with the external system. Okay, then, and this is the last slide. This is another. This is some example from the paper we work with Laura, that she is presenting in the poster, the number 15. You can show it. This is the idea that for example, the China, when we are representing all the human activities of the society inside and outside the market, and putting in hours per capita, we can find that in China they have 1,300 hours in paid work, and around this is the paid work activities, and in the other part is the household. No, what happens outside the market? No, all the child, the retired people resting, and so on. And what we have is that having this amount of hours in paid work, because they have a really low dependency ratio due to the child policy, then we have that they have around 487 hours in services. If we look at Europe, for example, we found that in Europe we have around 730 hours, almost half of the China, in paid work. But in the contrary, we have more human activity in services. Now we have around 522 hours. Then, if we are taking into account what happened with trade, we use also the XUAs to do this. We see that, for example, China is used in their imports have a balance negative. No, they are importing products that are embedded more human activity than what they are importing. And in Europe, we are getting around 500 hours per capita per year from our trade. Okay, let's go to the conclusions. Behavioral and lifestyle approaches present some problems, as I mentioned at the beginning, considering the unconscious routinized human activities, as practice theory is criticizing, but also contextualizing human activity in social ecological systems. Practice theory has emerged in the last decade, refreshing these frameworks to analyze the energy consumption, but it lacks considering some of the systemic, societal, and ecosystem boundaries. Museism, in this case, can present some set of tools about to contextualize these social practices in larger social ecological system, which bring us additional power to the practices theory. No? One will be this generation of quantitative closure, which makes possible to take into account what is the Jevons paradox among social practices. And also it connects social practices with the external ecological systems, okay? Taking into account the part of the externalization and the interdependency among societies. It brings also analytical tools alternative to the current models, taking just to account what happens in the market or the technological drivers, and enriches the available information for the discussion of radical imaginary changes if we want to take into account what is happening outside the market and so on, and the limits. Well, this is the reference. Yeah. Then I don't know if there is some questions. I will quite think.
Thank you, Raul. Thank you. I think we have, yes, quite some questions. Maybe for some people who turned in late or maybe don't understand the social praxis theory, Like, for example, Inigo is asking what's the difference between lifestyle changes and social practice approach?
What I found in the theory in the literature is that, well, it depends, no? It depends who is using it, the terms. But what I found in the literature is that the lifestyle approach is basically focusing in the part of the behavior and in connection what how the behavior is connected with the social perception of the others. No, this part of the symbolic meanings of the distinction that, for example, buying some product is generating in relation to the others. No, how our action is related to the meaning for the others. No, the collective meaning to the others, and social practice is taking into account more not only these issues, but also the unconsciousness, the part that we are not conscious about why we are doing some actions. No, you cannot ask people why they do things that we are not conscious of this. No, then the idea of social practice is to look this material part, that, for example, the infrastructure that is making us to walk in one way and not in another, or using one mode of transport and not another, and we are not being reflexive about this. No, we are not conscious of this. I think that this would be the quick answer.
So then Claire has an interesting question about your approach, and she asks, how do you account for the fact that multiple practices can be carried at the same time? So how do you account for multitasking?
Yeah, this is
division of time.
This is in the time use survey. There are different ways to do it. Basically they are asking to the people what is their first action, why they are doing the things. But yeah, at the level that for the current level of the analysis that we are doing, because this is what we are pretending to do, but we are entering little by little on this, because the idea is to connect with human child surveys, is that at the level of societal level, we have this, we can say this natural classification that is giving us the time in quite aggregated. And the multitasking is quite it's quite difficult to see. But for example, of course, there would be, if you are working in whatever activity, it is considered that you are performing this activity, and this is the way that we are also allocating the energy. No, when we are making the energy statistics, how much energy is using for agriculture. No? But this is a boundary problem that we will always have. Yeah.
You were critical on the behavioral approach, contrary to the social practices, saying that it doesn't take into account the social boundaries. But wouldn't you say that like input-output model analysis that you are doing also isn't really susceptible to very rapid step-like changes, but it's more like it's a deficiency of the methodology that also can only do smooth transitions?
Well, I don't get the problem. What is the connection? Because the first thing is that the input-output is just use it to get some numbers, but the methodology is totally different. The museum is not the same of input-output, but I don't really get the connection with the critique to behavioral analysis. What is the question?
My point is whether your methodology can actually simulate very rapid changes, or is it more about
Well, the methodology is not trying to model anything. It's just making accountings, making sense. If all the data that I presented, they are accountings, not trying to. It's like a budget accounting. It's the budget accounting. We can discuss is if this would allocated the energy or the time in one or another, for example, compartment. But I am not trying to know the future. What could be useful
historical
analysis is to check the quality of someone that is some narrative. No, for example, the European Union is telling to us that we can go to renewable energies in just in some decades. We can check it and say, I don't know how to make this with all the urbanization that we have, or how you will make this, or we can check, for example, the problem of intermittency, I don't know, at systemic and connection with the local levels.
Right.
It's the contrary. We are trying to check the narrative, the hegemonic narrative, not trying to build in it. Of course, you can try to build some scenarios, but you will depend on hypothesis.
So it's more a historical analysis than like predicting the future. Okay. And finally, maybe we have time for just one more question, which would be on the Jevons paradox. First of all, could you clarify what you mean by that? And is it a synonym for rebound, or do you mean it differently? Because Jeroen said that Jevons
oops, it got it. What?
Talks about the rebound that's bigger than the state before. So Jevons says that the paradox is that even after you have efficiency improvements, the overall use of, let's say, a good energy is still bigger than before. So it's more than 100% jump, no, from the previous state. And the rebound is not about that. It's just about an increase. It's not about a disproportional increase. Maybe that was the point Jeroen wanted to make.
There are different interpretations of the literature. I would say that could be the same depending the rebound effect that literature that you are using it, because also inside of the rebound literature, there are people that consider the same effects. I would say that it is basically the same idea, the different literature and different people talking about the same issue, I would say. But yeah, I'm using Jevons paradox because I think my background and the literature that I am using, it's using Jevons paradox. But I think when I go through the literature of Jevons paradox, sometimes people is using the same way, but I would say it's the same. But basically, it's this idea that you can have backfires, but also you have the change of the identity of the system. No, every time that you are changing the efficiency of whatever, the identity of the system is changing, and then it is unpredictable. But at least what we can do is to make this analysis of what is happening and take into account how these local changes in performance is affecting the overall system. No? Hello, Alyosha? You are blocked.
Maybe Alyosha is experiencing some technical problems. Well, but I think it was a very interesting session. Now I will invite you, if you want to check all the posters we have on the Discord channel.
Yeah.
We have a lot of very interesting posters. You refer to a few of them. And thank you very much for this very, very inspiring talk.
Welcome.
And let's go back on the Discord, and at 6 we will have the Zoom bar again. So bring your own drinks.
Okay.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Thank you very much.